Welcome back to Getting Started with Linux. I'm your host, Daniel Lowrie. Today's episode, we are looking at the file system hierarchy found in Linux systems. And joining us is Ross Brunson. Ross, glad to have you back.
Thank you.
Now, we looked at the file
time.
system just a little bit. It has been quite a minute, right? We've looked at the file system a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Can we get a little deep dive into this thing? Can we get a little more understanding? Peek a little more under the hood for us?
Yeah. I think one of the things that can be confusing to users who are encountering Linux for the first time or haven't had a lot to do with the command line is that there are a lot of things that are named similar. So, for example, the root of the file system is the root of the system is the /. But conversely, there's also a directory that's the root user's home directory called /root.
That's not confusing.
Yes, we don't need to be ambiguous, but it can be there. So it's always important to specifically state, like when you say something to someone and you know that clearly they've heard you, but instead they say, "What did you say?"
Yes.
It's like that with Linux. Linux will squint its eyes and look at you every once in a while and say, "I noticed you've typed something, but not correctly." So it's kind of hard to get to know and love. But the other thing that's important is to remember that there are areas that are only open to the root user, and there are areas that are open to the common users. Typical user is going to be able to get into the home directory that they're assigned, which is in their entry in the password file. And they might be able to access programs and other things from other directories, like the /bin, bin directory, stands for binary. But they won't be able to get into a lot of other stuff. And that's very important because when you want to lock users out of things they shouldn't really be in. Okay, it's like put the scissors on high shelves when you have small children, put the little plugs in the sockets and things like that. And yes, I guess we are kind of saying that users can get themselves in trouble. We all know that they do.
They sure do. I mean, they don't mean to be that way. It's just like a child doesn't know that could hurt them, so we safe it up for them. Same kind of idea here, right?
Yeah, and Linux is designed in such a way that it's security conscious by default, and then you have to open things up. Whereas other operating systems are more open or workgroup oriented, and then you have to do 200 or 300 things to tighten them up.
So it's kind of like opting into security versus opting out of security.
Pretty much, or allow nothing and make some exceptions versus allow everything and try to lock it down. So that's a good example. Other things that are important when you look at the file system is that directories like etc /etc. So, and this is, of course, you can pronounce it several different ways, but if you pronounce it the wrong way, everybody laughs at you.
Yes, they do.
It's etc. The etc directory is where most of the configuration files, the .conf or config files for the different services and things that are on the system are going to be located. That's a very important directory. /dev, that's where the device files are found. And a device file is kind of funny. It's almost as if you take a device and you hook a lead from that device to the device file. When the system interacts with the device file, it has almost like a conduit directly to that particular device. And so when the system is booted up, the management part of the kernel will map all the devices and make them available in that directory.
Awesome. Now, one that's always gotten me, I've seen it there, I've never really kicked my feet around it too much, is the /opt file. What's going on inside of that thing?
Well, opt is, I remember we looked this up a few times, and there's one way to explain it is, opt is one of those places where, say, old Star Office or LibreOffice, when you install it, it installs it into opt because it's optional. It's not considered to be something that a standard running system might have installed on it.
Gotcha.
So there's lots of little nooks and crannies in the file system that way.
The scales have been removed from my eyes. I can now see.
Good.
That has bothered me my whole Linux career. I've never dived into it. I got him right here. Ask him the question, right? All right, what are some other good directories we should be familiar with?
So I remember years ago, we used to have a situation where Linux systems were fairly straightforward, like 2 partitions maybe at the most.
Right.
And then it got a lot more complex because every time a file system, which is a partition and then a file system on top of that, that's a way of defining where the storage can be. So if that's full, it's full, you're done. Okay. So one of the things is that you want to take partitions in file systems and put them under directories that you wouldn't want to grow in space to take over the entire system. Now, Linux and Unix overall reserves about 5% for the root user, so you don't really run out of space. But you can definitely bring a server to a pretty fast halt if you fill up the file systems that it's still trying to write to. So things like /home which is where all the home directories for the users are. They have a habit of, pulling into town and backing up their laptop to the server. They don't know anything about space. Or /var, which is where all the variable data goes. So you'll see mail, log files, some websites, things like that. So it's important to know which directories are most likely to cause space problems and put them on their own file system.
And it also seems like, from what you're saying, is that they had a purpose in mind for each one of these directories. So like you said, maybe I'm running a website, so I'm a developer. I'm going to probably spend some time in var, right? Because I typically see Apache and other different web engines working inside of that area. So I think it's var www.
They moved it
that.
around.
Yeah.
It's been user. It's been SRV.
Right.
It's been all kinds of stuff.
Well, or if I'm a systems administrator, I'm going to find the logs in there, stuff that you would want. Kind of
Exactly.
keeping them compartmentalized, organized in an easy way for us, so we can find what it is we're looking for, because that can be daunting.
Well, and also being able to do things like rotate log files. So in other words, after a certain amount of time, you might have a lot of log entries.
Yeah.
So you do the log rotation, which brings to mind like lumberjacks and things like that.
does,
But not quite, and axes.
Yeah,
But what
spiky
it really,
shoes.
yeah, exactly. What it really climbing trees. What it really is you taking and closing off a log file and then backing that log file up and sending it somewhere or archiving it because it's important information for you to have.
All right. Anything else we need to know when it comes to the file system hierarchy inside of our Linux systems?
Well, just remember some of the important directories for your standard users. Your typical user is going to have access to their home directory, so /home/the username. They're going to have access inside that to pretty much everything, but things like your desktop directory. A lot of people will want to drop shortcut files and symbolic links and things like that to programs on the user's desktop. And so if you're going to address that to all users, you can just basically say, when the user logs on, we copy this to the / and then desktop.
Gotcha.
And whenever they sign on and it executes that script, then it copies that to them. So you don't have to write it for each and every user. You can just write it once and everybody executes it when they come in.
Man, you're just full of helpful information when it comes to this Linux thing. Man, you're making it too easy for
I'm
us,
glad you
sir.
specified helpful information other than other things.
All right, well, now hopefully you're a little more familiar. We're getting a better look and a better idea of how the file system is meant to work, some of the useful directories that we're going to find inside of there that's going to make our lives a whole lot easier as we continue to work with Linux operating system. So that being said, we're out of time for this episode. We've got plenty more in this series, so we'll see you then.